We have talked about Elastic Network Interface at a basic level during our EC2 session. It is the interface between a computer and internet. All traffic bound to and from internet travel through network interfaces. As you know about security groups, IP addresses, etc. in detail now, let's talk about ENI or Elastic Network Interface in a little bit more details now. Network interface contains these attributes. Private IP address from the network is associated with network interface. Elastic IP and public IP that is assigned by AWS are also associated with network interfaces. It might surprise you that security groups are also associated with network interfaces rather than EC2 instances. The reason it is said that security groups are at EC2 instance level because network interfaces always are inside of EC2 instances. They cannot exist or kept as a single entity. MAC address is per network interface basis. You can think of MAC address as a unique identifier for each network interface out there. Finally, source and destination check flag can also be associated with network interfaces. You already know what this is. We discussed it during NAT instances setup. Network interfaces are identified like this in AWS: ENI, dash, and then some ID. Network interface can be created, attached, detached, and reattached to another EC2 instance. That means, say we have two EC2 instances, INST1 and INST2. We can create a network interface which has these attributes. We can attach it to one instance, detach from there, reattach it to another EC2 instance. All these attributes would follow the network interface. One of the most important notes: network interface has to be created in a subnet. Let's take a step back and look at IP addresses in EC2 instances. Network interfaces can be used to assign multiple IP addresses to a single EC2 instance. Network interface can have additional secondary IP address attached to it. The IP address should belong to the CIDR range of the subnet for the network interface. For example, if network address of this subnet is 10.20.1.0/24, then all IP addresses of this network interface should start with 10.20.1. IP addresses can be assigned to network interfaces which are attached to either a running or a stopped EC2 instance. This is an important point because your EC2 instance should not be in stop state to have a new IP address. Your application can be running while you provision new interfaces. As you can have different IP addresses in a single EC2 instance, multiple websites can be hosted on a single server by using multiple IP addresses. Let's look at a very interesting scenario now. This is an EC2 instance. We can attach multiple network interfaces to this EC2 instance. We know the attributes of network interfaces. So, can the network interface 1 belong to a subnet which is different than the network interface 2? Yes, of course they can. This can be a public subnet and this can be a private subnet. And this private subnet can talk to another AZ subnet and set of EC2 instances just like our 3-tier architecture. Interesting, isn't it? A single instance residing in two subnets. Remember one thing though: attachment of Elastic Network Interfaces to EC2 instances and designing using Elastic Network Interfaces will be your job as SysOps administrator or solutions architect. But setup of multiple IP addresses inside of those EC2 instances will have to be done by the Unix admins. That means the moment you attach these network interfaces, your job is done. How these network interfaces would be mapped to IP addresses inside of this EC2 instance has to be done by the Unix administrators. We can create a high-level solution using this ENI property. Say we have two EC2 instances with the same applications running on them. Network interface is attached to this instance. We can create a script which monitors the applications or EC2 instances all the time. If this instance goes down, then the network interface can be detached from it and attached to other running EC2 instance. Everything remains unchanged. Security group, private IP address, Elastic IP, public IP address, source destination check, nothing changes. However, this is a cheap solution and should be used only for small applications. Let's look at how to work with Elastic Network Interfaces using Management Console.